Hello everyone. Today I want to show a brilliant game played by Wilhelm Steinitz, the first official world champion. Although this game was played about a year after he had lost his title to Emanuel Lasker. The opponent was Curt von Bardeleben. Let's check out the game. Steinitz starts with e4, then we have e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4 and bishop c5. The Greco panels on the board and c3, the main line. Knight to f6, d4 hitting in the center, e takes d4 and c takes d4. Bishop b4 check and knight c3. In this case, knight into e4 is possible, in which white does give up a pawn for the attack and black should not really try to hold on to that pawn, but d5 immediately was played and e into d5. Knight into d5 and white castles. Here maybe it's best to just castle, but although black would love to castle, the d5 knight is now hanging because there's no pin on c3. So bishop e6 defending and bishop g5 going after the queen, and we will notice that black will have some difficulty castling. Bishop to e7 going back, bishop into d5, bishop into d5, knight into d5, queen into d5, bishop into e7 and knight into e7. So a lot of captures have taken place, but still there's still some poison left in the position. Rook e1. This makes castling for black quite difficult. The knight has to be defended, so black will have to go for some means of artificial castling, although that may not be very easy. f6, trying to create a room on f7 for the king, and queen e2, threatening checkmate and also making it even more difficult to castle. Queen d7, defending, and rook ac1. Why not take the semi-open file for the other rook? So all white's pieces are active and black is in difficulty because the rooks are not connected. The black king is still in the center. c6, just not making the c7 pawn a target. King f7 was certainly possible, and if queen into e7, queen into e7, rook into e7, king into e7, and rook into c7 followed by rook into b7, black could still hold on to that endgame. This certainly was an option. But after c6, Steinitz played d5 first. He sacrificed a pawn. Of course, the knight can't capture. If the queen captures, then there's checkmate on e7. You don't want to ignore the pawn because white will simply capture on c6 and leave the queen side vulnerable for black. So c into d5 has to be played, and knight d4. The d4 square was secured, was occupied by the pawn, and now the knight will jump in. King f7, castled almost, but not quite. First knight e6. There are some threats of queen h5 or queen g4 going after g7. And the knight is quite solid there. Rook h to c8, trying to exchange some pieces, which is quite principled, but queen g4 anyway. And this is quite fast. The attack happens much faster than black is able to defend. g6, preventing queen into g7. And here comes the beauty. Knight g5 check. Of course, the knight can't be captured because the queen on d7 would hang. And king e8. Now I'll ask you to pause the video here and just try to imagine what was that wonderful move Steinitz played which makes this game so famous. The move over here is rook into e7 check. And let's just marvel at this position for a moment. The knight on g5 is hanging. The queen on g4 is hanging, and the rook on c1 is hanging, and white has a back rank weakness. Amazing, isn't it? Now, what are the responses? If queen into e7, now we see that the queen and the rook are attacking on c8. So rook into c8, and queen into c8. Excellent. White is clearly winning in this position. If king into e7 was played, then you have rook e1 check. If king d8, then knight e6, forcing the king back onto the e file, and you will pick up the queen later. So king d6, keeping a guard on the queen, but queen b4 check. E file is off limits, and if rook c5, trying to block, then rook e6. Very, very good for white indeed. So the rook sacrifice had to be declined. King f8 was played. Now let's try to imagine how do we continue with the attack. Steinitz said, okay, you don't want to capture my rook. How about capturing it on f7? And we have the same problems again. If the king captures now, then queen into d7 immediately wins. If the queen captures, then again we have a capture fest on c8, and white is up a piece and has a strong initiative. So king goes to g8. And Steinitz says, no, I'm still going to give you my rook. Okay, rook g7 check. You are not going to get away by declining the sacrifice again and again. Black ran to h8 and rook into h7 check. At this point, black resigned because there is no getting out of checkmate now. What happens is that the h file is now open. So after king g8 at this point and rook g7, if king goes to f8, then knight h7 is very strong. It will force king e8, and then queen into d7 will be checkmate. And if king goes to h8 now, there is queen h4 check. And the queen will infiltrate from this way and forcing king into g7. So the rook finally will have to be captured. Queen h7 check, king f8, queen h8 check, king e7, queen g7 check, king to e8, queen g8 check, king e7, queen f7 check, king to d8, queen f8 check, queen to e8, knight f7 check, king d7, and queen d6 check. So this wonderful 10-move sequence was provided by none other than Wilhelm Steinitz himself. He had foreseen this when he played rook into e7. So a brilliant victory for the first world chess champion. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you soon for the next game.